I'm going to review my new table saw. This is the Grizzly G0715P. The new Grizzly hybrid table saw, which I got about a month ago. I've had it set up down here in my shop and I've got it working. So I'll give some initial impressions and tell you why I'm ultimately sending it back. So initial impressions, pretty good value. I think I paid about $800 for this, plus a little additional for shipping and handling, and maybe $50 or so for the mobile base. We've got good rip capacity and a good fence on it. Fence operates smooth. You can get out to about 30-inch rip capacity, which is pretty good for a saw like this. Gears seem tight, they work well, moving the blade up and down, that all feels good, and it just generally feels like a good heavy-duty saw. Unfortunately, mine's got two pretty serious problems. First one is blade alignment. So if I raise this blade all the way up, and I use this little jig I've got set up with a dial indicator. By the way, if you're getting a saw, highly recommend you get a dial indicator to help get you set up. If I have the blade all the way up, set up this dial indicator and get it perfectly parallel to these miter slots. And then I think I'm all set and done. Then I lower the blade back down to my usual operating height, which might be, say, an inch above the table. Well, that blade, which was parallel, then tends to kick out about 50 thousandths to the left in the back there. So obviously, you got a blade that's not parallel or changes its parallel every time you move it up or down. That's a pretty serious problem. So let me see if I can illustrate that here. So I'm just going to put this on the back of the blade. Zero out my dial indicator. Just put it, point this down a bit more. Let's see if we can see it. Alright, so I'm going to start lowering the blade. And you can see that dial indicator clicking over. Alright, so there we're at zero before. Already we're about 25 to 30 thousandths out of parallel there, or the back is kicked out. So that's a problem, obviously. And I'm sending the saw back. Other problem I want to point out is that this fence rail here wasn't parallel. And so again, I'd use my dial indicator, lock the fence down, get it all square, but then as soon as I moved it somewhere else, all of a sudden I'd no longer be square. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. But let me just put a square on this rail, or sorry, straight edge on this rail, and you can see what I'm talking about. Alright, so this magnetic straight edge. I don't know if you can see this or not, but we're probably about a 16th out over here. And after fiddling with it a little bit, I figure there's a high spot kind of somewhere in here, and it ends up throwing off the blade quite a bit. So between those two issues, my take is that this has the potential to be a good saw, but quality control seems to be a little bit lax. One example of how you clearly should have caught some of these is someone at the factory adjusted this fence, and when they did that, if you see this right here, they had to push this one all the way out basically, whereas this one's still mostly in. And that should have been a sign to someone that this rail was bowed. But no one seemed to take a second look, and it went out of the factory, came to me. Obviously spent a lot of time setting this saw up and thought I had everything perfectly parallel, and I go to make a cut and ended up with some sort of dangerous situations with my blades trying to pull my sheet of plywood to the left, the fence isn't square, and I'm basically just wrestling things around because everything's about 50 thousandths out of parallel. One other thing, if any folks from Grizzly are watching this, little design tip: if you lower this opening just about a ½ inch, maybe even a ¼ inch, it will let you get in to these access bolts to take this plate off. As it is, I'm going to take this angle iron off every time I want to get in here to make these adjustments, which in my case I had to make 3 or 4 times before I figured out what was going on with this blade. So the other thing to note about the hybrid is trunnions are mounted to the table. I don't necessarily think that's a terrible thing. It makes adjustments a little bit harder. But that can be greatly simplified if they made this access a little bit easier. So ultimately, I'm sending it back, getting a refund, and going back to the drawing board, try to find another table saw.